Straight back up, Leicester City. Playing football the Enzo way. We are champions of the EFL Championship in one of the weirdest title races I've ever seen. From going 17 points clear at one point of third place, to looking like we'd fumbled it all and were potentially ending up in the playoffs, to an incredible 10-day spell to wrap up the league where we're now champions and could potentially win it by 10 points and finish on 100 points. This is Leicester City. We never make it easy for ourselves. So how on earth did we get to this stage? And what's next? Well, at the start of the season, I did a video on the rise and fall of Leicester City. It will be linked in the description if you're interested. And it ended by asking what next for Leicester this season under Maresca. We had picked up a couple of signings and that was it. Will him and his tactics win us the league? Will Vardy bow out after firing us up to the Premier League? Or would it be a decade-defining season in all the wrong ways? So let's go through the main parts of the season, including signings, big games, and this crazy run-in to end it off. Let's start with Maresca. Previously, Pep's assistant during the City treble season came to the club and vastly impressed the board in his initial interview. He's come in with Manchester City-like tactics, possession-heavy football, trying to bait a press from the opponents, and then launch quick passing-based attacks. A system where the defenders have to be as good on the ball as the rest of the players, and able to find that killer pass through the lines. Throughout the season, he's come under a bit of scrutiny for not having a plan B, which a lot of managers have right now, and also for some of his substitutions, or lack thereof. But as we have now been crowned champions of the league, he can't be doing that bad of a job. Not only is it a different type of possession football than under Brendan Rodgers, but as we've seen at Man City, it often takes a year for players to adjust to the system. And so for the club to risk choosing Maresca as the manager showed some guts to basically take the punt on him and have faith that he'd be able to implement the system and tactics so well in order to get us promoted first season. It's going to be fascinating to see where we go from here and how his tactics are going to work in the Premier League alongside potentially some new signings that fit the roles that he likes. Speaking of signings, let's go through the squad. One by one, let's look through who each of our players have been this season. Here it is, the beautiful promotion-bound squad. 3 goalkeepers, Danny Ward, Mads Hermansen, and Jakub Stelarczyk. Now, Danny Ward was hounded last season as being terrible under Brendan, and one of the reasons why we got relegated. I think he was actually a scapegoat for parts of the season, but the drop-off from Schmeichel was obviously big. He has basically played no part this season, and I think everyone would be amazed if he's at the club next year. Mads Hermansen was an incredible signing. Few million from Brøndby. No one had ever really heard of him. Best stats in the league. Post-shot expected goals, the most important one for goalies. He is top of it. His distribution is ridiculously good. I have personally said since a few months in, I think he is a future Man City or Liverpool keeper. He's that good. And then our backup has been Jakub Stelarczyk. He has played in the Cup. He's also had a couple of appearances in the league as well. He's been really good, just a slightly worse version of Mads. So going forward, those two will still be the main ones next season. Let's go through the defenders. So we start off with James Justin. Actually a bit of a letdown this season. I personally think he's been one of the worst players that has started a lot of games for us. And it's got to be hard going from a fullback that is known for bombing forward to one that is basically playing as a centre-back in this system. So maybe after a year of being part of it, he will adjust better and be better going forward. Wout Faes got ridiculed in the Premier League, and I still don't understand why. He had one unlucky game against Liverpool where he conceded 2 goals, own goals, and for some reason people have based his entire ability off of 2 pieces of bad luck. But he was actually really good for us. This season, he's had periods where he's been fantastic, and then the period where the team sort of fell away a little bit, he was at fault for a few goals. So hopefully he can take those parts of his game out and keep the good ones ready for the Prem. Connor Cody brought in for experience, basically. He hasn't played that much this season, but when he has, he's been the level-headed defender that maybe isn't anywhere near as intricate on the ball, his dribbling isn't as good, but he's a no-nonsense defender that gives leadership qualities. He's been really, really good for the dressing room and the club as a whole, been travelling even when he's not in a squad and stuff. He's been fantastic. Callum Doyle was an interesting one. We signed him on loan from Man City this season, and at the start of the season, he was playing most of our games. But then he picked up a big injury and was out for a chunk of the season. His passing range is immaculate, which is one thing that is really pivotal at times in this Enzo system. And his long, pinged balls out to Fatawu on the right wing have been magnificent when he's been playing. However, defensively he's been a bit susceptible, and I think he would need to raise his game in order to be a Premier League player. So whether we will try and sign him, whether Man City will loan him out again, I'm intrigued. Harry Souttar, sadly, has had a bit of a nothing season. He's not featured. We didn't really want him to stay, or Enzo didn't, but we couldn't really get anyone to come and sign him. And so he's been that bit part player that if we really, really need someone, sure, he'll play Harry. Which is a bit of a shame because he did well in the World Cup, he did well previous to his move, but it's just a manager style issue. Ricardo Pereira is one of the best players in the Championship. He could genuinely still be playing in the Champions League. He is that good. I cannot believe he is still our player. Will he be in the summer? I don't know. I would love to hope that he is, because not only is he an incredible player, he's such a nice guy as well. I love him. I met him and he was just a lovely guy. Yannick Vestergaard has had one of the biggest turnarounds at our club that I've seen any player have. 2 years is how long Brendan Rodgers spent chasing him to try and sign him. Then we brought him in for a big fee on big wages, and he turned him into an outcast. It was baffling. He just completely set him aside and didn't even interact with him. It was scummy, to be honest with you. But under Maresca, Vestergaard has found a new lease of life, and he's been the pivotal centre-back. He's been the guy. Every attack starts through him because he's the one that starts the baiting of the press. He's been fantastic, and I never thought I'd be saying those words about him in a Leicester shirt. Ben Nelson is a youngster that has had a few appearances and has done relatively well when he's been given the chance. So it's one of those players where you imagine next season he'll probably find himself on the bench quite often and will be moving up towards being in the main squad more often. Maybe as a replacement for someone like Harry Souttar. Harry Winks, what a signing. He fits into his role in this team perfectly. He's the guy that receives the ball off the defenders and then moves it forward. Or off the keeper and pings it out to a fullback when the press has been pushing him and then suddenly we've got space to go. His pass accuracy and everything like that is normally incredibly high, and he's very, very good at starting moves, progressive passes and things like that. So, beautiful signing. Really, really looking forward to seeing him in the Prem. Mark Albrighton, sadly, coming to the end of his Leicester career, hasn't featured much this year, but when he has come on, he's come on with some big goal involvements, and you can't really hate Albrighton. Whether you think that he's a good player or a bad player is irrelevant. As a man and part of the club, he's been really, really good to us. Picked up on a free loads of years ago from Aston Villa. He's been an incredible servant, and yes, some seasons have been significantly better in terms of helping the team and output and stuff than others, but it doesn't matter. He's had a great career here, and it will be sad to see him go, but maybe it's time. Hamza Chowdhury is the worst player in the club and the worst human being in the club. I would happily see him sold instantly, but he signed a new contract last summer, so I don't think that's going to happen. KDH, the big money man. If we have to make sales in the summer, he's probably the guy, isn't he? You can probably get somewhere like 40, 50 mil for him. Based on rumours and everything like that. In January, that's what it would have taken to get him sold. Now, would it be higher because we're in the Prem? I'm not really sure. But he's been great. He's been our most overrated player because in some games, he's been a moments player. Whereas throughout the full 90, not as impressive. But some of the goals and some of the assists this season have been incredible. and his number of goal involvements is sublime. He's up there with like top 3 players in the league this season for those reasons. I just think Twitter overrates him slightly compared to our other players and how well they've played. But he's been fantastic. Ndidi this season turned from a defensive mid into an attacking mid. An 8/10 role for him, linking up with the right winger, making cutting runs inside, crosses to the back post, accidental goals when he's tried to pass it to someone. It's been baffling to see, but really intriguing. He's out of contract in the summer, so whether we try and hold on to him or not, I'm really not sure, because we've got another player that I'll talk about after this coming back from loan that may suit the role a little bit better. Dennis Pratt is a man that probably shouldn't still be at the club. He should probably have been sold about 3 years ago, but we've had troubles selling those kind of players massively for years. He's done an okay job when he's played, and I think that's all you can really ask, to be honest. I would be amazed if he's still here come the start of next season. Casey McAteer, youngster who started the season on fire. He is one of the best wingers we've had in recent years of getting in at the back post on the end of crosses. If you watched the title winning game against Preston, you would have seen him score from one of those, whilst also missing one in the first half. But ever since he got his injury at the start of the season, when he came on as a sub and had other appearances, he didn't look quite the same. Maybe he's just taken a bit longer than expected to fully rehab from his injury, and we'll see a fully rejuvenated Casey in the Prem. Jamie Vardy, our GOAT. Really? Is he the best player that there's ever been for Leicester in terms of like their whole career? Probably. You could say someone like a Lineker, Gordon Banks, Peter Shilton. You got Kante, who had one of the best individual seasons, Cambiasso as well. But Vardy, for the length of time he's been here and what he's achieved individually and as part of the club, it's on another level. He is the GOAT. And the fact he can potentially end up with like 20 goals in the Championship this season when he had a couple of injuries, he wasn't starting all of the games, second half of the season, he's just come to life. And maybe it is what we talked about earlier, that players in these kind of systems take a while to adapt, and then when they do, suddenly they flourish. So, we love you, Jamie. Mavididi, very interesting player we've got here. Hot and cold is basically the best way to sum up Steffi. In some matches, he looks absolutely electric and unstoppable. In others, he just doesn't seem to have that mojo to drive at defenders, even though his dribbling and stuff like that in tight areas is fantastic. It's odd, and I'm slightly cautious as to how he'll do in the Premier League, but also optimistic. Iheanacho has had a very flat season. I think most of us thought that he was probably going to be our main forward this year because he was going to suit up the link-up play in this system that we have with Maresca, dropping a bit deeper as a striker to receive the ball earlier, then fire it into a winger, get forward, potentially be on the end of a cross and finish it, or get the assist with the through ball in behind. But he took his run of starts poorly and never really recovered from that. I think he's one of the players in the summer that we probably sell. Abdul Fatawu, our star boy, on loan from Sporting, and he has been electric this season. Ever since his first sub appearance, he was exciting. And that is the main word for Abdul Fatawu. He's awesome. And the fact that we can now sign him permanently for like 15 million euros is amazing. Because regardless of what happens to us next season, I'd be amazed if we don't end up massively profiting on Fatawu. Daka, disappointing. He had a couple of games where he was scoring and getting goal involvement, but we've all seen this season the number of horrendous misses. And if you're not cutting it in terms of your finishing ability in the Championship, it really does not bode well if we're going up and potentially having you leading the line. I think he could also be one that we look to sell. Tom Cannon, very exciting player. Got him from Everton in the summer and just haven't seen enough of him. I feel like basically every Leicester fan would have loved to have seen him get more minutes. Now, you can't really argue with what we've done up front because at the tail end of the season, it has ended up getting us promoted and winning the league. So, next season, maybe he becomes more into the fold of starting or sub. Basically every game. Because he is Harry Kane-esque in terms of maybe 5-6 years ago, Harry Kane. Every single time he gets the ball, what does he want to do? Shoot. Kane developed into a more well-rounded, team-based player with some of his passing ability and stuff, but when he was a bit more raw and younger, he'd be getting shots off all the time. That's what Tom Cannon is like. He's very direct, very forward-thinking, and I love that in a player, and I really want to see more from him. Yunus is also on loan. He has not played enough to trigger his clause of us needing to buy him. I don't think that Enzo has been impressed enough in order to want to sign him. We bought him as a winger, but then moved him into like the 8/10 role. His dribbling and technical ability in tight areas is really, really good, but his end product hasn't been there. You can't fault his work rate at all. I think it's one of those where it's a bit unfortunate. Maybe in another life it would have worked out, but I just don't quite think it clicked well enough in order for us to go for him. And Wanya Marcel just hasn't played anywhere near enough to really warrant a mention here. Maybe next season he'll be pushing towards being on the bench more and we'll see more of him. So in terms of players that are out on loan right now, we have Daniel Everson in goal. I think he'll probably be sold because we're not going to want Stelarczyk, Hermansson and him. You'll want like the older, happy to just not play keeper as your third choice. Luke Thomas has had 2 different loans and I don't think we really have any interest in keeping hold of him, so I think we'll try and off-sell him as well. And then Christiansen, he came in with all the passion and stuff last season, but at the start of this year when Enzo came in and was discussing tactics and everything, he basically said, I don't really want to play that role. I like being a marauding left-back. And he's doing really, really well in the Serie A this season. And apparently they want to sign him for roughly the same amount that we'd be able to afford Fatawu for. So, seems like a win-win situation for everyone involved. And then the player I was talking about before, Boubakary Soumaré. So we saw a little bit of him under Brendan a few times, and there were some runs of games where he looked really good, and then others where he just didn't look like he had the mobility or the stamina in order to really be a box-to-box midfielder. Apparently, he's been good for Sevilla this season, and so will we potentially try and keep hold of him if we don't re-sign Ndidi and use him as that 8/10 role? Potentially, he can also fill in for Winks if he got an injury, because he would be good also at receiving that ball and moving it on. So Enzo has said he wants a physical presence in one of the number 8s. So we've got Dewsbury-Hall and Ndidi. So Soumaré would fit that role, that big forward-thinking player. I'm interested to see more of him under Enzo. A couple of the big games that happened this season, we obviously had Leeds home and away, Ipswich home and away, and then some of the run-in matches. Leeds at home was hard. They were good in that game, and we didn't really deserve too much out of it. They missed a couple of big chances as well, and yeah, I'd say that one was fair. However, Ipswich. This league could have been done ages ago if we hadn't got so unlucky in both of the Ipswich games. We conceded double deflections in both of those games to change the result. Stonewall penalty against Dewsbury-Hall in the away game, not given on Boxing Day as well. We were very unfortunate against those in both games. And then Leeds away was one of the big points in the sort of tumbling down the points gap that we had against Leeds. They got lucky in that game. I know that their fans will go on like they did the double over us, but we scored a legitimate goal to go 2-0 up and they said it was offside. And then they proceeded to score 2 deflected goals against us in order to go on and win the game. So we got really, really unlucky in 3 of the biggest games this season with goals that changed results. And that sucks because it really looked like it was going to affect us as we kept dropping down the table. Well, not down the table, but that points gap was getting smaller and smaller. Those results were huge in that happening. And then as we get to the very tail end of the season, Leeds, Ipswich and us just couldn't win a game to save our lives. There was one weekend where none of us scored a goal in a 3-way title race. What on earth was going on there? But the 2 1-0 losses away at Plymouth and Millwall basically gave us a kick up the backside. Jamie Vardy organised a players' meeting with allowance from Enzo and his assistants. They told them that they were happening and they said fine. And they basically had a big group gathering together and discussed what was going wrong, what they could potentially do right. And since then, we've smashed it. We hung on so well at home to West Brom. And that was a monumental result to get that win because they deserved to win. That was one of the biggest games of the season where we got a result that we definitely did not deserve. And then the absolute smashing of Southampton 5-0 was just crazy. Some people may have expected us to win with the momentum from West Brom. No one expected that smash. So that back-to-back was phenomenal. The pressure, too much for Leeds and Ipswich, still dropping points. We go to Preston and we win the championship. What a run of 10 days separating, oh God, we're actually going to throw it away to, we're champions! What a mental league title race this has been. So what next? It's really hard to say. And I think this is the hardest it's probably ever been to discuss this kind of thing about what happens next season because there are multiple things that we simply don't know right now. One, we do know if we had stayed down, then we would have had a transfer embargo in place. We couldn't re-sign or sign any new players. Whereas in the Premier League, that isn't the case. So we can re-sign anyone whose contract is running out, like Vardy, and we can sign new players like Fatawu. Big dub. However, we have breached PSR, and we will be starting next season with some kind of points deduction that can go up to 12 points. If you go into the season starting on -2, it's not the end of the world, right? That's very recoverable. If you go into the season on -12, all of a sudden, relegation looks a certainty. You also don't know how much money do we need to raise in the summer to basically not breach things again. Do we need to sell 5 players for like 100 mil or something in order to be able to raise enough funds to be fine? Because if so, Dewsbury-Hall, Daka, Iheanacho, all these guys are going to have to go. But if we only needed to be like 30 mil in profit, then you would probably have to, sadly, still say goodbye to Kiernan. But you could retain some of the other players that you don't want to sell. So it's very, very hard to judge what kind of talent we're going to be able to bring in. Because in January, we couldn't bring anyone in. We tried to bring in Sensi on loan, but then their lawyers at Inter changed things last minute, and we couldn't agree with it in time, and so it fell through, even though he'd flown over, done a medical, and everything like that. So it was absolute shambles, the January transfer window. Absolute joke. And it kind of nearly cost us, because Cassidy went back from his loan here, back to Chelsea, hasn't played really since. He was going to get so much game time because Ndidi got his injury, but they record him because he wasn't getting enough. He was literally about to start most games for the next 3 months, but it is what it is. We've still gone up, but we just can't really predict what is next due to these PSR problems, due to the points deductions. It's so incredibly difficult to know how to even start to think about next season. So I'm not going to. We've got 1 game left on Saturday. It's going to be a massive party. We're going to lift the trophy. We're going to have some beers. We're going to have a fantastic day. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the Premier League. Goodbye.